So, yeah, I'm Nicola Lang. I'm a member of Transition Homes Community Land Trust in Totnes in Devon. And so I'm going to talk a bit about community-led design, particularly the Community Land Trust movement, and our specific eco project called Clay Park, which is in Dartington. I know a few of you here are architects and builders. If you're not an architect or a builder, give me a wave. Okay, fantastic. So if I said there's going to be like a small group of you, maybe 9, and you're going to put together plans for an eco-development, would you feel able to do that? No? Okay, well you can. I'm actually a geologist. I worked in paleoclimate research for a number of years. And I decided I wanted to do something a bit more hands-on, practical, to tackle the issues around climate change. So I'd always been interested in architecture, particularly eco-building. So I took a short course in straw bale building at CAT, and then I volunteered on a few projects, spent a few weeks here and there, and then found myself in Totnes, where I joined a project to build some local, affordable, sustainable housing. So you don't need to have a lot of experience, basically, to get involved in this kind of thing. If you're not familiar with community land trusts, they're not cross-laminated timber. It's a not-for-profit organisation, and it's designed to benefit people of a particular geographical area, and it's run by people from that community. A CLT can develop and manage housing, but also any asset that the community decides is important to it. So that could be the bakery or the pub or some workspaces or food growing areas. But ultimately, most of them try to provide affordable housing for local people. And although you can, sell that housing or rent it out, typically the CLT retains the freehold of the land. It holds it in trust on behalf of the community in perpetuity, so it can't just sell it off for a load of profit. The CLT movement started in the US, but it took off in the UK about 10 years ago with some pilot projects, and there's now over 170 CLTs in England and Wales. Some of the bigger ones in urban areas have around 1,000 members, although we're rural and have a few less than that. And you can see on the map, there's quite high concentration down in the southwest in Cornwall and Devon where we are. And probably a lot of that's linked to affordability. The main point really to say about CLTs is that regardless of your background or your skills, you can get involved and take a hand in what's happening in your local area. So it's really a sort of empowering way for people to develop what they need, what they think their community needs. So we're based in Totnes. It's a really beautiful place to live, beautiful and historic town. We're on the River Dart. We're near Dartmoor National Park. There's beautiful beaches on the south coast. So it's a popular tourist destination and a really desirable place to live. So therefore it's expensive. Totnes is also quite well known for its kind of community spirit and sort of alternative culture. So that includes Transition Town Totnes. How many of you are familiar with the transition movement? Quite a few, great, good. For those of you who aren't, it's a grassroots movement, basically where local people come together to work on projects to make their community more resilient and sustainable. And it's turned into a sort of an international movement now. There's about 500 transition initiatives around the world, but it's still grassroots. There's no sort of top-down decision-making, there's no hierarchy. It's local people responding to their local issues. And so there are often themes that emerge, such as food or the local economy or building and housing. And in our case, Transition Homes CLT was formed by a group of people who met at TTT's Building and Housing Group, who'd recognised that we're facing some issues with housing locally. So I said it's quite expensive in our area. The average house price in the South Hams area of Devon's a bit over 300 grand, and the average salary is a bit below the national average, 20 to 25k. So if you're a normal person in our neck of the woods, and that includes myself, you cannot afford to buy a house. And if you're my age and you want to settle down and start a family, it's really prohibitive. So there's a real issue of affordability. The other issue is around sustainability, which is obviously why I'm here talking about green architecture today. There's a lot of building developments, housing developments going up in our area at the moment, built by Persimmon, Linden and other big developers. And they're sort of business as usual, brick and block, they're small, they're expensive. and they provide the minimum number of affordable housing units that they can get away with. The legislation obviously just doesn't cut it when it comes to sustainable housing. Code for sustainable homes is abolished and zero carbon homes abandoned, and building regs set a really low standard, and they don't take into account things like the embodied energy of the building materials that you're using. So we want to take a more holistic approach to sustainable housing. And really, affordability and sustainability should go hand in hand. You know, highly inefficient housing can lead to fuel poverty and just exacerbates the issues of affordability. Whereas if you build a highly energy efficient house, you can really reduce the running costs to a very, very small amount. So rather than having these kind of crap, expensive houses forced on us by profit-making developers, the CLT offers a way for local people to facilitate the kind of development that their area needs. So we came up with a kind of mission statement. We decided that a community land trust was the right legal structure for us. And we wanted some kind of common vision to work towards. So to create an inspiring, replicable, low-impact, resilient community of economically, socially and environmentally sustainable and affordable homes. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it captures the key points really about sustainability and affordability, and also that it's not just housing, it's about the community. So our approach to design is very different to that of just a conventional architect-client relationship or that of a big housing developer. I was looking for a word to kind of define or describe our design process and how we've integrated all these different inputs from the community, and I guess crowdsourced might give the right kind of feel. Ultimately, the decisions are made by us, the CLT, and there's 9 of us. And we've got various skills. We've got a little bit of construction experience and also in energy efficiency projects and social housing and project planning and things like that. But not a lot of design experience, and so we also employ an architect. But as a community-led development, we've taken on board local people's contributions, so we want to respond to the local community's needs. We've also consulted with various local experts from local projects who we can collaborate with, and also, you know, experts in their field nationally, such as permaculture or drainage. And then we've also taken inspiration from other eco-developments around the country. We're influenced by permaculture and take the sort of more holistic view on sustainable building. As I said, it's not just the housing, but it's a community and a way of life for the people who are going to be living at this development. And we've had contact with a lot of other CLTs, and one of the reassuring things is that we all face the kind of same issues, basically, around finding land, raising money, getting planning permission. And in our case, we've raised about 130 grand of mostly grant funding for pre-development. It took us a number of years to find a site. We pursued one site in particular, and that fell through, and there was a lot of money wasted there. Once we eventually found our site, we had to raise £250,000 to buy it. And then the site itself has informed our design through the constraints and opportunities that it offers. The planning department sadly haven't been particularly supportive. The affordable housing team have, because they're desperate for affordable housing in our area. But we've had many negotiations with the planning department because they're trying to impose their normal expectations about a development on what we're trying to do, and ultimately many of those things aren't compatible. We've also had to negotiate with the Environment Agency as well, and had to change our plans a little bit because of them. So it's been a really organic process and an iterative process, and it's taken a number of years from our sort of initial thoughts, developing a design brief, presenting our plans to the community, and then integrating all of the feedback that we've got from them. So I'll talk a little bit more about the contribution the community have made to our plans, also the kind of group dynamics of designing as a group, permaculture as well, and some of the inspiration that we've taken from other eco-communities around the UK. So unlike some other CLTs, we're not building houses for ourselves. A lot of CLTs self-build. We're actually designing and building housing for local people who are in housing need. And we're local people, but most of the group already have homes. So on the one hand, maybe it's easier for us to be more objective when we're making decisions because we're not, they're not going to be our own houses. But it's also really hard to make decisions on behalf of other people and to make decisions in their best interest when you don't know them personally. We don't know who's going to be living there yet. So it's been really, really important to us to get local people's contributions into our plans. So there's various ways that we tried to enable them to contribute. We've held 6 community consultations in the local village hall. About 80 to 100 people have attended each one, which isn't bad for a small village. And they haven't been particularly high-tech events. You know, we put posters up around the room and with post-it notes, and we encourage them to make little comments about what they like and don't like and what they need. And then after the event, you know, we compile all of the feedback that we've received and also the conversations that we've had, and that feeds into our designs. And we've gone back and back and back to them over a number of years to show them how we've taken on board what they've said they need. We've also done a couple of surveys, one of potential residents. We've got 130 households who have signed up and expressed an interest in living at the development, which is pretty amazing. We've also done another survey around ideas for a community building we want to have and around education and training opportunities. And we've also taken data from the affordable housing team, which has helped to afford our housing mix. So we're trying to ensure that we're providing the type and the size of housing that people in our community need. And that data's just backed up what we found in the resident survey, which was great. And then, of course, anyone can join the CLT. It's open to anybody in Dartington and Totnes and the surrounding area. And although there's only 9 of us at the moment, there have been about 20 people who've been involved over the years and contributed their time. It sounds very obvious, but communication is really important for a scheme like this. Because sustainability is such a key part of our ethos, we're trying to do some things which are different. And in a small village in a conservative area of the country, some people find that quite intimidating or worrying. And obviously the best thing to do is just to keep them informed. So we've tried to be as approachable as possible and always available to answer questions and tell people about what we're doing. And we've been really pleased, actually, that people have responded well to that. So designing in a group has its own challenges and benefits. We're lucky we get on really well and we respect each other's contributions, but some of the group have been working together now for 7 years, so it's not surprising that we get on so well. The benefits include obviously the range of expertise and experience that we've got and the ideas and perspectives which different people bring. People are always coming up with ideas that you might not have thought of on your own. But it's also really important to agree a decision-making process early on and to stick to that. It can be really, really frustrating, if you haven't got clear-cut decision-making, you can end up going over the same ground again and again and feel like you're not making progress. We use majority rule for decision-making, but you need to make sure that everyone gets a say and also that concerns are taken on board. So we've also used 5 to fold for sort of more contentious or important decisions. And inevitably we've had some conflict and we've needed facilitation on occasion and people have left the group because of, disagreements. We're such a sort of principled bunch of people, we're all trying to achieve this amazing ideal of sustainable housing, and unfortunately compromises have to be made, and sometimes those compromises are just too big for everyone to agree with. So we found there are a lot of tools available when you're designing as a group. All sorts of things around communication, having productive meetings, decision-making, and project planning. So non-violent communication techniques are really, really useful. There's dragon dreaming for project planning, and a lot of these have come out of permaculture and also intentional communities. So I've mentioned permaculture, and I assume most people in this room are pretty familiar with it, but the permaculture ethics of people care, earth care, and fair share, they underpin the transition movement and its philosophy. So it's not surprising that as transition homes, we're influenced by permaculture. And as Bryn said earlier, it's kind of a framework, really, using processes that you see in nature to help you to design sustainable systems. And although it started in agriculture, it's applicable to really any kind of design process, and I think very, very applicable to housing. So we didn't follow a kind of formal permaculture design process, but we did always have in mind the permaculture principles when we were designing our development. And one of the first and most important things in permaculture is observation. So here's our beautiful site called Clay Park. The 2 photos are taken from opposite ends of the site, looking towards each other. And I guess kind of lucky in a way that it's taken us so long to get to planning, because we've now been observing the site for 3 years. You can see the land slopes fairly gently down to the north. And because of the topography, there's a little bit of shading in winter, but it's not too bad. We've got plenty of rainfall in our neck of the woods, and we're on quite a heavy clay soil, so it doesn't drain very well. And we've had some very wet winters recently, so there's quite boggy areas that you really wouldn't want to build on. The surface water flows down the site into a stream that runs between us and our neighbours, if I can get the right button. on this one. Neighbours run along here. We've got about a dozen neighbours to the north of us, and some over the road as well on the other side. But other than that, it feels like very semi-rural, very peaceful, lots of birds singing and so on. And yet we're only, 15 minutes walk from Totnes town centre and 10 minutes from the station. So it's a really accessible site. Other sort of limitations of the site, we've got our boundaries are old, unmanaged hedgerows, and we've got lots of mature trees. We've got badger sets. There's also bats, but they don't seem to roost on our field, but they do feed along the Dart River. There's a public footpath that runs up the left-hand side of the site up there, and following approximately the same route, there's also a high-pressure water main, which we can't build on top of. And somewhere in the site, there's a bomb crater from the Second World War. Our neighbours said that there was a bomb dropped on the way to Plymouth, so there's a little bit of contaminated soil to deal with as well. And then the only access point to the site from the main road is right down the bottom here in the very narrowest bit, and the road that runs along there is a link road between Totnes and the A38, so it's quite a busy road with a lot of traffic. So there's quite a lot to think about and consider around the site, particularly around the access, the neighbours, and water management on the site too. So considering some of the permaculture principles, the obvious things are around food production and land management. So we've tried to embody the permaculture principles when we've been thinking about what we're aiming to do at the site. So obviously we want to obtain a yield. So we're providing food growing areas for the residents, allotments, and also an orchard and forest garden areas as well, with all the benefits that, growing your own food brings. For earth care, the land will be managed organically, and plenty of new planting on site to provide habitat and increase biodiversity. I won't go through all of these, so on to energy and waste. We've considered, again, the permaculture principles, so catching and storing energy, so designing the buildings with passive solar design in mind to capture the sun's energy and then use Earth as thermal mass to re-release that. The buildings will be highly insulated with low embodied energy materials, so reducing energy use in construction and also through their lifetime. We've opted for renewable building materials wherever possible, renewable energy systems. We're using semi-integrated solar panels which stack functions as a roofing material too. And then we're looking to collaborate with a local community energy company on our energy scheme so that local residents can invest, and so the benefits are shared locally, and also so we can provide subsidised energy to our residents, which help again with the affordability of the scheme. So we've worked with Patrick Whitefield in the early days on our site before he got ill, and since then we've had links with Aranya and Caroline Aitken, both of whom were students of Patrick's. So I think his kind of approach has really influenced us. He had a kind of I think the belief that you kind of just take on board the permaculture principles and you deeply understand them and you apply them to what you're doing, rather than using a more rigorous method. Not rigorous, but maybe more structured. So we're going to have compost toilets. And we're really, really proud of this because we had to put up a really hard fight to get permission to have them. Human waste obviously contains valuable nutrients, and at the moment we just flush it away down the drain for other people to deal with it. But conventional wastewater treatment has some serious environmental drawbacks. It uses a lot of energy to treat that water, and we contaminate huge quantities of a valuable resource, clean drinking water, with something potentially toxic, and then produce vast quantities of waste to have to treat. So we thought the solution would be to have a wetland ecosystem treatment system or a reed bed system on site to process all of our wastewater. But sadly, the Environment Agency didn't agree. There's kind of a hierarchy of sewerage systems, and at the top is connecting to the main sewer. And if you can do that, then the EA thinks you should. Even if you present them with the case that your alternative is far more sustainable and will use less energy and less water, they wouldn't give us a permit, sadly. But composting toilets don't use water, so they don't produce wastewater. And somehow, I'm not entirely sure how, we managed to persuade them to let us have composting toilets. So composting the solids on site and then using them on our site, on our agricultural areas, while the grey water from the showers and sinks and washing machines and so on has to go down the main sewer. This was incredibly difficult. It took months and months of negotiation with them and a huge amount of research to convince them that we knew what we were doing and there wouldn't be any environmental or public health impacts of what we were doing, including trying to work out how much compost 27 families were going to make and writing a compost toilet management plan, which the Environment Agency has approved. So some people think that the idea of composting toilets is pretty gross and wonder why we'd want to put our poo on our vegetables. The first thing to say is that of all the sewage sludge that's produced at a conventional wastewater treatment works, 60% of that is put on agricultural land. So it's a very well accepted process. You know, poo obviously accepted as a valuable fertiliser. Once it's treated, it's considered safe, and it's done all the time. And also we're going to have to test our compost, so to make sure there's no salmonella, that E. coli is at acceptable levels, that the pH is acceptable, and that trace heavy metals are not going to contaminate the soil to which it's applied. So we'll be going through a really rigorous process, and it's actually a really great research opportunity around kind of community scale composting. Composting toilets can look pretty normal. I'm sure some of you had lovely experiences with compost toilets, and some of you probably had horrible experiences with compost toilets. But these will be indoors, in bathrooms, on the ground floor. They only need emptying once a year, so they're pretty low maintenance. And as toilets account for around 30% of domestic water use, they'll be dramatically reducing water and sewerage bills as well, again contributing to the affordability of the housing. So as far as we're aware, it's the first kind of development that's going to have this kind of community composting scheme. If any of you are aware of something similar in the UK, do let me know, because I'm sure we could learn a thing or two from them. But we're quite proud that this is going to be the first one of its type. So I mentioned that we've taken inspiration from others, and there's no point reinventing the wheel. So we've looked to learn from others' successes and failures in their eco-communities, and expect that people will look to us and learn from our successes and failures in the future. So here are just a few of the eco-communities around the UK that we've looked to for inspiration, and also people who've approached us to offer advice as well. And they're just amazing with how open they are, how willing to share information. And it's a really fantastic community to be part of. So one thing that we found that we really liked was the common house, which is usually a feature of co-housing schemes. Somewhere where people can gather, share a meal, have a meeting, a class, a workshop, a creche, whatever. And we really liked Lancaster's kitchen and dining area. We like the warmth and the light, and they've got a cosy seating area as well with a wood-burning fire. And then at Lammas in Wales, they've got a community hub building which serves some of the same functions. It's also used for education and training. And we loved their use of natural materials and how it sort of softly blends into the landscape with its green roof. It's also used as their pub, the Hub Pub, on a Friday night, which is fantastic. And we realised, not because of the pub, that it was really important for us to provide somewhere for our community to come together. So although each community is unique, we found strong similarities between some, particularly when they share this common ethos of sustainability. I could also show Lammas and Land Matters and a bunch of others who are doing really low impact self-builds. But for these ones and ours, we've all decided to go with terraced housing. It's more energy efficient than detached homes, it uses less building materials, and it can also help to create that sense of community that we're looking for. You'll also notice that there's no car parking in front of any of these houses. The car parking is kept separate so that pedestrians get the priority and the bulk of the site. And promoting sustainable transport is another really important part of having a holistic, sustainable development. Lancaster, in particular, only has 11 cars for 41 homes, and we're looking to replicate something like that ultimately at our site by restricting car use. And then most of these ones are sort of rural or semi-rural, so they have the luxury of space, but many of them have lots of communal outdoor space for people to enjoy. So back to our site, what did we come up with? Well, we were never going to try and win any awards for groundbreaking architectural design, so in some ways our designs are quite sort of modest and traditional. But we're going to build 27 terraced homes, built of timber frame with straw bale insulation, timber cladding externally and earth plaster internally. We're trying to use locally sourced, renewable natural materials wherever possible. So, like Ben was talking about this morning, we're not quite that advanced, but we do want to use products, say, from local woodlands that are being managed sustainably. The housing mix is a combination of affordable rental, shared ownership, and a few market houses. We did find, and this was one of our compromises, when the costings came in, as is often the case, they were a bit higher than expected, and so we couldn't reach our 100% affordable target, and we need a small proportion of market houses to cross-subsidise. That's quite normal actually for CLTs to do that, because it's very, very hard to provide particularly affordable rental homes because of the loan finance that you've got to take. The terraces face south-southwest, with glazed solar spaces, solar panels on the roofs. And as you enter the site from the top, the first thing that you come to is the community building, and also a plant room for a district biomass heating system, which will be fuelled by locally sourced wood chip. And next to the community building, there's a village green with a play area, and there's also a shared laundry. About a third of the site, mostly to the south, will be undeveloped, with the community orchard, wildflower meadows, allotments and coppice. We're also going to have swales and ponds for water management. As I said, it's quite a wet site. And along the boundary, we're creating a new Devon green lane with Devon hedges for the public footpath, along with plenty of planting of new native trees and restoring the hedgerows. And between the terraces run pedestrian lanes with low-level fencing around the gardens to encourage people to interact. We're not trying to shut people off from each other. And each of the houses has bike storage. There's extra bike storage for visitors on the site. And the parking's relegated to the edge of the site along the boundary here. That's an ongoing fight with highways, by the way. They want us to provide 3 car parking spaces per house on an eco-development. Anyway, so it's not just about the buildings. You know, as I said, we're trying to build a community as well. And to build a community, you've got to get people involved. So we're yet to be granted planning permission, although it's looking very good at the moment. We've got a huge amount of local support. And once we've got planning permission, and the decision is due in about 6 weeks' time, then we can start allocating the houses to local people. And we get to meet the 27 families who are going to be living at the site. And we really hope then that they'll start making the decisions. You know, it seems much more appropriate that they decide on the colour of their front door, or if they want open plan living, and also to be involved in the more detailed permaculture design of the site. And that's really the beginning of creating a real community at Clay Park. So residents will automatically be members of the CLT. We'll be doing a bit of a recruitment drive as well to encourage more people to join, as there's still a lot of work to be done to raise finance and actually get the houses built. Many hands make light work. And another part of our ethos is around education and training, so spreading the word about different ways of providing housing, which is why I'm here today. During the build, we're looking to offer training opportunities in eco-building, in community-led development, so maybe apprenticeships or internships, and there'll be the opportunity for people to volunteer as well. And of course, we'll be encouraging the residents to get involved as much as they can, because of that sense of ownership that you get when you build something, and the sense of pride that they will feel. Plus the fact that it will help them to understand how a house that's built of natural building materials is put together and how you look after it. So I hope that over the next few years, some of you might come and visit us down in Totnes. Maybe you'll lend a hand as part of the community build, or you might come on a course in a few years' time about eco-building. But I really, really hope that you might have a look on the National CLT Network website and find out if there is a CLT near you that you can get involved in, because there seems to be a lot of enthusiasm and passion and knowledge in this room, and that could really help to make a project like this a success. Thank you.